Living in Virginia, you're in the fast lane on the information superhighway. We've invested $3 billion in Virginia's broadband network to give you one of the fastest internet connection speeds in the world, so you can build relationships, bring new business to our state, and meet the future of education. It's amazing what we can do together. Visit VCTA.com to learn how broadband connects the Commonwealth.
From the General Assembly and the City of Richmond, I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Chantel, connecting Virginians to their government. We're so pleased to have Senator Frank Ruff with us today from Mecklenburg. Good to see you, sir.
Woody, it's a pleasure to see you again. There are a lot of changes this year, but you're not one of them. You're looking exactly the way you did last year.
Well, I'm glad you're here. I know you weren't up for re-election, but congratulations on coming back. And I think you're still chairing the General Laws Committee?
That's correct.
We're in a new building, Pocahontas building. Are the rooms bigger or smaller for you now?
The rooms are smaller and the halls are narrower, and I had to have a C&I dog to get to the studio.
There are also more cameras around, as I understand it. For example, in the committee rooms, there are cameras everywhere, I take it.
Yes, there are official cameras this year. Last year we had cameras from citizens groups. This year we've got official cameras that record the whole thing. Plus there are other citizen groups also. So it's for us, those of us who are not very handsome, it's a challenge.
And citizens now are able to access through the General Assembly website live streamings of the committee hearings and meetings now.
Right, you can go back and look at those committees that you wish to see what actually happened.
And I also understand there's a requirement now, although most people observed it anyway, I believe there's a requirement that votes in subcommittee need to be recorded now.
In the Senate, we've always done that.
Okay.
And occasionally somebody would misinterpret a vote, but the policy has been for a number of years that every bill got heard by a committee and got a vote.
Right. So I think if my math is serving me correctly, this is your 25th year in the General Assembly. I think you had 7 on the House side, and now this is the 18th on the Senate side, I believe. We're getting close to that.
That's about right, yes.
So you must have seen a lot of changes. Let me ask you this. When you first came to Richmond, what was the makeup in terms of Republicans and Democrats, if you recall?
In the House, the election that I came in brought us relatively close, within probably about 4 votes difference. Then the following years when it went to 50-50, and then it just folks who had been in charge decided that was time to go ahead and leave, and
right.
So that's when you had the movement from Democrat control to Republican control. So.
And obviously, even though it doesn't affect your chamber directly, there's been a monumental change over on the House side. I think there are a total of 19 new members, if my memory serves me correctly, 15 new Democratic seats, and I think there are 4 new Republicans there. So I guess that will have some impact on the House side and eventually on the General Assembly in general.
Yes, very much so. We don't know how it will form. On a short-term basis, we won't know that until the end of the session, or well into the session, of how the dynamics change.
Right.
Last year we got legislation that maybe we won't get this year.
Right. Right.
Same thing, we may have passed legislation last year that won't see the light of day over there.
Right.
So you just don't know what the dynamics will be.
Right. Tell us a little bit about the committee you chair, why it's important, and what kinds of things you handle there in general.
Well, it's important because I chair it.
Of course.
No, we deal with a hodgepodge of legislation that deals with real estate issues, with veteran issues, the lottery issues, just when things don't fit anywhere else, they fit into general government. Plus, we do the technology issues. So they touch people's lives in various ways, and we just have to keep mentally changing gears from this topic to that topic. In courts, they just deal with good guys and bad guys. In education, they talk about education.
Right,
but
right.
we have to be more nimble on our feet.
So how many subcommittees does your committee have?
I don't like to use subcommittees.
Okay.
I do one for the FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act, because sometimes they're in conflict with each other. We like to get them all together, and Senator Locke kind of gets them in order and sees where the opposition is and then brings it to the full committee. Other than that, I like to try to get as much as possible through the full committee, because those 15 people need to know what the issues are.
I see. Now, with the advent of technology, especially the internet, and of course 25 years ago, there was a huge difference. You can pre-file a lot of bills now before you come to Richmond. That's good. That has some very positive aspects, but on the other hand, does it have an impact on relationships that you were able to form 25 years ago, or were required to form, in terms of getting co-sponsors, co-patrons, and that kind of thing, and also making sure that people weren't filing the same or very similar bills?
That's a challenge, having people file the same bill or something similar. 25 years ago, the first week was spent trying to find co-patrons and make sure that you weren't stepping on somebody else's toes. Now, everything gets thrown in the hopper, and then you make the decisions afterwards whether you want to roll bills together or whether you want to let somebody else deal with the headaches of legislation. But it is far different. One of the early years I was here, I suggested we maybe ought to change the way we do it and have a session where we come in and introduce bills and then go home for 30 days and then come back better prepared to know what's on the table. But the pre-filing probably accomplishes the same thing.
Right,
It does change the dynamics between members, yes, no question about it.
I take it you and other members get a lot of ideas from constituents in terms of bills to pursue, no matter what the session is.
Yes, this year with a new governor coming in, and my decision was to not try to have any great undertakings, yet I turn around and I've got people coming to me and saying, you need to do this for local government, you need to do this for this particular group, you need to do this for one state agency or the other. So it's, I have a hodgepodge of things that I can't brag about if I pass them, and I won't cry if I lose.
Right. Now, you come from a very large district, as I recall. You've got about 10 counties, I believe, something like that. And I know you have a lot of windshield time when you need to visit constituents or attend meetings. Talk to us about the demands of such a large district.
Well, I used to say it was 4 times the size of Rhode Island, and then I realized that nobody knows how big Rhode Island is, so it looks real small on a map. So I tell them right across the river from Jamestown to 10 miles from Martinsville. And then wherever you live, and you understand that that's a long ways away from you. And it's about 2.5 hours each direction for me to get to meetings, and nobody ever coordinates meetings with each other, so sometimes it's I might drive 5 or 6 hours or 7 hours in one day to get from here to there and back home again.
Is the largest county Pennsylvania?
Physically, Pennsylvania is the largest.
Okay,
yes.
okay. What about concentrated towns? Or I guess, I mean, Mecklenburg is one, but are there any chartered cities of size?
The only city is, I have 2 precincts in the city of Danville.
Danville, okay.
I used to make a joke when when the district was a little differently shaped, that I had 2 cities, Pamplin City and Chase City. And if you don't know about them, they're both towns, but Chase City has about 2,000 people and Pamplin has maybe 200 people, but they both have the name city in their thing.
Oh, I see.
And Congressman Hurt just thought that was the most hilarious thing, and he would tell it whenever we're together.
But of course, you have at least 200,000 constituents, basically.
Yeah, about
more or less. In terms of keeping in touch with your constituents, do you use town halls at all, or constituent surveys on a website or anything like that?
We do that, but the most effective thing we found was I do a weekly column in about 15 newspapers, and then I do a email once a week that kind of reflects the weekly column, and I do that year round to try to get information from people and understand what they like and don't like. And
right.
And that's been the most effective thing. We've tried town halls, but that has to meet my schedule and their schedule,
sure.
and making sure that the media sees,
right.
Gets it out so that people actually hear about it.
Do you wind up visiting a lot of individual families from time to time as you drive throughout the district?
Occasionally, but the driving eats up most of the time. But you know, being 2.5 hours away from some of the constituents, if they have a problem, they don't need to add 5 hours of driving.
Right, right.
So I try to work it out that I can meet them halfway, or design a meeting time that will be by their neighborhood.
Right, right. Now, how's the economy in the district doing now? You know, we had the recession for a number of years. Some parts of the state have come back far better than others. What about your district?
We've had challenges since NAFTA in the 90s. We have not recovered from all of that. We're getting along. Some counties better than others. The Danville community was hard hit, but they've had some great higher technology manufacturers who are coming or planning to come. That's helped that area. Same thing with the Halifax area. Sometimes there's an announcement of jobs and there's an announcement for a loss of jobs. In Mecklenburg, Microsoft has made a commitment that that's going to be their largest data center in the world, and they continue to grow. So there are elements of success and elements of concern.
Talk to us about those pre-NAFTA days. Now, that was a North American Free Trade Agreement, supposedly. What was it like then, and what were the changes that occurred as a result of it that really hit your economy?
Well, in his example, Clarksville had, at their high point, 2,200 jobs, mostly making high-quality worsted wool for suits.
Mm-hmm.
When NAFTA hit, they started looking for ways to reduce costs. So they started doing lesser quality and less quality control, which did not help. But they built a plant in Mexico, believing that was going to be their salvation. And eventually they went bankrupt. Dan River Mills in Danville, I think, at their high point, which is probably several decades before that, I think they were close to 4,000 or 6,000 employees. So just massive workload, numbers of employees, but they were not the highest skills.
Right.
But people were satisfied. They could make a living for their family, and maybe they would do a little farming on the side. All that changed when NAFTA came about, when they started getting cheaper clothing products made in the Far East. First it was India, and then it was Pakistan, and
Right,
it was
right.
just a drive to the bottom,
Right.
which is great for the consumer, but it's not very good for the
Right.
worker.
So textile, tobacco, and furniture were all hit.
Right.
Pretty much, huh?
Very much.
Tell us about the Tobacco Commission and what impact that has had economically for your district and the region.
Well, it's helped us get out of some of the problems we've had. We have put a lot of focus on education and workforce training, and so we've offered scholarships to young people willing to come back to the region, a forgivable loan,
Sure,
effectively.
sure.
We have focused on those skills that they could get good paying jobs with, skills such as precision machining and welding, and where there is a demand in the market for those jobs. At the Southern Virginia Higher Ed Center in South Boston, they are now a Siemens Level 3 training program, which is, they are the only non-4-year school in this country that does that kind of training. And that means that people may come there to get training to go elsewhere, which is very positive. So there are some bright spots, but we've been able to create 3 centers of excellence in the tobacco region, one down in the Bristol area, one in Martinsville, and one in South Boston.
Now you mentioned machinists, you mentioned plumbers and electricians, so those are the kinds of trades where people are appropriately trained, they can obtain gainful employment, I take it.
Yes, and that was the drive I've had statewide in workforce, is to, as an example, welding prior to this year was a 2-year associate degree program at college. Well, if you've lost your job and you have a child or two, you can't wait 2 years to get a good job.
Right.
So to change that to a 6-week training program and be certified and go out and start making good income was extremely important.
Now, to what extent are your junior colleges active in that area of workforce development? Not junior colleges, I mean the community colleges.
You're starting to show your age
Yeah,
there.
you're right.
They have jumped on it statewide. We have now trained 6,000 people to the level of getting certification, and their pay increase from what they were making before they went into the program and after is, I'm not going to say 3 times,
Right,
but I
right.
think that's where it's going to equate, is from minimum wage jobs to some of these coming out in the low 40s. The power line program we have at Fort Pickett, the former governor
Right.
enjoyed talking about that. Those guys come out, they're well trained, they're skilled, they can make overtime, they can make much more than that 42 or 43,000, and in a couple of years they can easily be making 70,000 a year.
Now, I believe, was it last year that the legislation passed regarding Go Virginia, or maybe that was a couple
Yes.
of sessions ago? Has that had any impact in your district? It was supposed to encourage more cooperation among localities. I don't know whether your localities were not cooperating, or has that had any impact at all from your perspective so far?
It has. It's not as much and as fast as anybody would like, but remember you had 138 jurisdictions that were competing against each
Sure.
other. We have got some of them out of that mindset. They're at least talking to each other, and their part of the program is that they can be rewarded for that, of working together. as far as direct impact yet, it's a little early. We've tried to stay away from projects that may be iffy, and we want winners when we come out.
Sure.
And so far, the only ones that have been approved essentially are programs that are going to advance training, and they were in the Tidewater in the Northern Virginia area. But those were the highest priorities that made sense.
Right. Is it difficult once you train a youngster, we're talking about somebody right out of high school, to keep them in the district, to keep them in those localities? Or are you seeing a drain, especially of young people out of your district, out of that region, to other areas of the state or even out of state to obtain employment?
Well, to train them to go elsewhere is not the greatest scenario,
right.
But that's what we do with colleges, four-year colleges generally too. Anecdotally, I will tell you that the precision machining program at Danville Community College is excellent. Rolls-Royce went from Prince George down to Danville, recruited several to take back to Prince George. But after a while, they gravitated back towards Pennsylvania County. They got jobs in Lynchburg, which was within the distance they could commute to stay with family and friends and make a similar salary. And that's great, because keeping those roots keeps parents and grandparents a lot happier.
Oh, absolutely. Now, in terms of the training for a welder or in trucking, those kinds of things, how long is that training? Is that a matter of weeks now?
Yes, it can be.
Okay.
You can, if you're the former policy of training somebody for a couple hours a day for 2 or 3 days a week was great if you could stay at home and get free meals and bed to sleep in. But if you had dependents, you needed to faster programs. So if you could train somebody 6 hours a day. So most of these programs are geared to a much shorter time frame.
In terms of attracting small businesses to the state and to your district, what else can the Commonwealth do? You know, there's been a lot of talk about reducing overburdening regulations. You were a businessman for years. Is that something that would be helpful?
It would help, and we constantly are looking for ways to do that. Sometimes it's a lot easier thought process than it is. But that's the more bureaucratic government is, it scares people away from opening a business, because they're afraid they're going to do something wrong and be penalized or whatever. And so, but you can't really attract business, small business. You have to grow. And that's one of the biggest challenges we've had in the last couple of decades. I think we've bred out entrepreneurship in a lot of young people. Instead of asking, what do you want to do, we ask, where do you want to go to school?
Yeah.
Who do you want to go to work for? The right question is, what do you want to do with your life, and how can you achieve that?
Right, right. How's, speaking of the public schools in your district, how are they faring, especially K through 12? Are they doing well? Do you see room for improvement? Are they getting adequate funding?
There's always room for improvement in everything we do in life. We just have to accept that reality. Are they adequately funded? No. The less populated parts mean that you have a different mathematical equation of how you fund. If you just to get kids to school, if you're in Fairfax or Loudoun County, you pick up 100 kids in a short distance.
Right.
To pick up 100 kids in a lot of my district, you'd have to go a lot of miles. So that kind of issue is important. Interestingly, 3 counties in the state of Virginia have the same number of students as 109 jurisdictions.
Is that right? I didn't realize that. Wow.
And there are about 15 in the middle that kind of weigh their own. But Fairfax County and those counties are just so massive.
Sure. Sure. Now, your district is primarily a rural area. To what extent is agriculture important in your district in terms of farming, the raising of, let's say, cattle, poultry, producing, soybeans and corn, those kinds of things?
Yeah, all that's extremely important to the economy. It's hard for a family to survive just on a farm income, so the modern day scenario of full-time farmer is the spouse may have a job in town, teacher, nurse, whatever. Or as I used to say about my father, he worked 5.5 days in town so he could afford to be a full-time farmer.
Now, what about corn and soybean, especially soybean? Because I remember a few years ago, Todd Haymore, who's the former Secretary of Agriculture, being really excited about a big shipment either to Japan or China as an export product that the Commonwealth was able to do through the Port of Virginia.
Well, yes, and that's great when you can do that. Any commodity will always go to the lowest price. And so if you're selling the same product as your neighbor, so there's always going to be some place that can grow it cheaper. The important thing in agriculture is to make a product that people want. And we were successfully able to do that with the soybeans. I think it started in the New Kent area, where you had a product that the Japanese desperately wanted. And so whenever you can create something of greater value, then that makes it a winner.
Right. I guess another potential revenue producer would be hemp, but unfortunately there's still some federal laws that prohibit its growing and use, although I think there were some experiments, if you will, somewhere in the state of Virginia in terms of growing hemp recently. I
think 3 universities, maybe 4, have been doing experimenting, but until the federal law changes, you can't do much.
Right.
Every year you have to buy new seeds, and seeds over a period of time, the plant would tend to acclimate to the climate and the soil. But you have to destroy all the seeds each year, so you have to keep going back to Eastern Europe and getting more seeds.
Right.
And so it's not moving forward very fast. There are so many products that can be made with hemp. There's a company in Indiana that makes the side panels for cars out of hemp. They have to import all that from overseas, which makes absolutely no sense. But if you ever hear one of those cars get hit on the side, it's an amazing sound.
Oh, is that
There's
right?
no clang, it's boom.
Boom, boom. Well, thank you for being here, Senator Frank Ruff. Good luck in this 2018 session.
Thank you, Woody.
Thank you for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Chantel. Until next time, I'm Woody Evans. Mm-hmm.